Hello, I'm Cole Spivey, the writer of Chapter 27. It's a one-man, well, it's not a one-man show. It's a 4 or 5 person show, but I never really completed the play, but I did read Take Me Down, which is a bio. He has some things incorrect on Mark David Chapman and the assassination of John Lennon, but he's close. This is, if we can see it here. Sorry, my cat's in the bathroom. That's his toys and stuff. But the final moments of John Lennon visited the Dakota in his first. It doesn't say the whole thing. So here's my correction. It's about double fantasy. If I'm not mistaken, Mark David Chapman went into a record store and bought Double Fantasy and had it autographed by John Lennon. He says that John Lennon went out and recorded Double Fantasy, which would be impossible because the album was already out on the shelf. So Mark David Chapman went into a record store and bought Double Fantasy, which is a John Lennon album. It's a John Lennon recording, like a vinyl album. He took that vinyl album and the cover and everything, and he met John Lennon twice. There was a doorman that was a witness, and there was a famous photographer, Paul Gurish or whatever. He mentioned him. Paul, who's the photographer, got a famous photograph of John Lennon and Mark David Chapman standing next to each other. It's a photograph that's been published several times. The only correction I have is that John Lennon had already completed Double Fantasy. So that had already been completed before he assassinated him. He used a Charter sidearm that had, if I'm not mistaken, I think it had 5 bullets in the chambers. Instead of having 6, like a revolver has 6, this is a revolver that had 5 bullets. He unloaded all 5 bullets towards John Lennon's body, striking him, I think, at least 4 times, if I'm not mistaken. The autopsy, you have to look at the autopsy report, but it was enough to kill him almost on spot. He did not die on the spot. John Lennon did not die on the spot. Yoko Ono was there. She screamed. She ran over to him. And then he was transferred to the hospital, a nearby hospital, where he spoke of Sean Lennon and his sons, while Yoko, eventually when they got to the hospital, Yoko waited in the emergency room, and then John Lennon was pronounced dead at the nearby hospital, where he was taken by ambulance. It was done with a Charter type of, the special type of gun. Another thing that was witnessed, Mark David Chapman kneeled. He kneeled before love, just as you'll do. He kneeled and aimed the gun in military-style pose, just as your people will do. And he kneeled it like that and fired 5 times. Everyone kneels before love. All right, another correction, because I've read Let Me Take You Down, which is a bio about Mark David Chapman. It is true that Mark David Chapman was a big fan of the Beatles. It'll probably be failed to be mentioned, neighbor's dog, but he was, Mark David Chapman was a huge fan of Todd Rundgren, who he was listening to quite a bit before he kneeled, and this is what's interesting, because they witnessed him. He did kneel to steady the aim. So he was kneeling to actually steady his aim, and he put the gun over the wrist, kneeling, as kneeling before love. I was just being poetic. And then he fired all 5 bullets. I believe it was 5 in the revolver. But another thing I wanted to say was Todd Rundgren was his kind of idol. That's who he listened to enjoy music. He wasn't listening to back-to-back John Lennon songs. Another thing that Mark David Chapman did before he went to New York from Hawaii, because he was a security guard in Hawaii, is he signed out as John Lennon before going to the Dakota and assassinating probably one of the greatest musicians of all time, other than Beethoven, John Lennon. He signed out as John Lennon. He didn't sign out as Mark David Chapman. He signed out as John Lennon. Just as someone will sign out as Cole Spivey. It's true. He'll sign out as Cole Spivey. Pretty good, isn't it? I do highly recommend Jack Jones' Let Me Take You Down, which is inside the mind of Mark David Chapman. This whole area in New York City is completely, it's an obsession. People will go there, they'll take photos, it's amazing. They probably have, I don't know if they have a plaque, but the Dakota, they say, is haunted. I always remember it as a little more gray. And I don't know for sure if I went by Central Park West to see the Dakota at the time. I was still thinking about the play, because I was going to write it was a show. It was a play. It was not a one-man show. It was an actual play with like 3 or 4 characters. It even shows Mark David Chapman as a teenager when he went to Florida and dropped acid. He actually dropped acid in Florida with a friend. I was going to have a scene of that. It was also going to get into the whole mindset of him in Hawaii, I think, and then making the decision to go to New York and live in the life of Holden Caulfield. Now, when he was doing all this, he was delusional, thinking that he was Holden Caulfield from this book right over here, which I still have. The book is called Catcher and the Rye. And this book is by J.D. Salinger. This book was with Mark David Chapman, I believe, in his pocket. It was in his pocket when he killed John Lennon, or it was left in his hotel room, where he left everything out. He had a poster of The Wizard of Oz. He had a copy of The Catcher in the Rye. I think it may be an extra one. I believe he had some other items that were kind of like a message to whoever went to the hotel room that Mark David Chapman stayed at. He had left out these items before the assassination. I have to go back and read Let Me Take You Down, which I mentioned the writer just a while ago. Jack Jones is what I said. But check it out. Check it out. Now we're back about the assassination of John Lennon by Mark David Chapman. There's a bio, or it's not a bio, it's a book explaining the life of Mark David Chapman called Let Me Take You Down by Matt Jones. Geffen Records released Double Fantasy in November of 1980. The assassination of John Lennon took place on December 18th of 1980. So you were able to get a copy of Double Fantasy in the record store, which Mark David Chapman had, and a book of I know Kitty, just give me a moment. I'm talking to my kitty. Book of Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. He had that on him. Boom. That's where it happened in 1980. I know, Kitty. I know. I'm going to talk more about Mark David Chapman. I'm going to be obsessed with it. I was going to write a play. They made a movie called Chapter 27. It was done with Jared Leto, and it made me mad because they got that title from the documentary, probably. I always thought they got the title from my play. I did leave the play in a storage unit in Manhattan. It was in a pink spiral. Okay, I knew what she's talking about. Okay. I don't know where that would be. Darn it, I know I saw that. Yeah, it's a horrible thing. And John Lennon supposedly predicted the death. He talked about crucifixion all the time. He talked about, yeah, there it is. This is fine right here. This will work. He talked about assassinations. He was obsessed with all that. John Lennon was, yeah. John Lennon was very obsessed with it. And a lot of people predicted that that's what was going to happen. And, man, it did. And no one really, I mean, I guess they could have predicted it, because I think they could have predicted the assassination, if you call it the assassination, but the murder of John Lennon from Mark David Chapman, because he signed out. He signed out of his security job, or it was a security guard job in Hawaii as John Lennon. That would have worked. You know, well, hey, something's wrong. Yes. So Mark David Chapman signed out of his job as a security guard in Hawaii as John Lennon, not Mark David Chapman, John Lennon. Then he went on this trip thinking that he was Holden Caulfield in the book Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, pretending like walking around. And he went to Central Park, just like the character Holden Caulfield in Central Park, because it's set in Central Park. And he watched the merry-go-round. Now, in this particular moment that Adam the Woo is talking about, he talks about the single watching the wheels. And that's important, because he heard that song on the radio. Remember, they used the radio as a way to advertise music. He heard it, and it was a sign from the heavens. He heard watching the wheels go round and round, which is similar to the ending of the book Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. It's very similar, because Holden Caulfield sees the merry-go-round going around and around, and it just sprung right in Mark David Chapman's head. Boom. I'm going to kill John Lennon is what he decided when he saw the merry-go-round and heard the song, probably coming from a taxi, probably coming from a car, you know, watching the wheels go round and round. I really love to watch them turn. If that's the lyrics, sorry. What does he say? Well, he says a lot. John Lennon says a lot. I do want to talk about what Mark David Chapman did after he killed, or he didn't kill John Lennon on the spot. John Lennon died at the hospital, but he shot him I think it was like 4 times or something. I know it pierced him in 2 places in his body where he was not able to recover, and one was the lung. I think he was hit in the lung. It did flood his spleen. His spleen was overreacted, and it flooded it. And he was not able, there was no way they were going to save him. The bullets that hit him it was a fatal shot, you know. And he hit him more than once. Mark David Chapman used a revolver that was a 5-chamber revolver. It was a charter gun, whatever that means. But it's published in Let Me Take You Down and Jack Jones. Jack Jones, not Matt Jones. That's the guy who plays Badger in a thing called, what is that called? It's called Better Call Saul, which Mark David Chapman pretty much had to do at that point. Now, there's something that happened. After he shot John Lennon, he took the revolver. He did something very important. He placed it on the ground. If Mark David Chapman did not surrender the revolver, I think also it was either the doorman might have taken the gun from him. But the rumor is he set it down on the ground, but the gun was taken from him. So by the time the police came, Mark David Chapman was unarmed. And he was sitting on the sidewalk with the copy of Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. So that is true. If he would have held on to that gun, there's a good chance they would have killed him. But he surrendered the gun and then awaited for authorities. It's a very, very amazing case right there at the Dakota in New York City, Central Park West. Check it out. This is an Adam Wu post, probably one of my favorites. I don't know if I'm going to write the play about Mark David Chapman. The reason why, and I go all the way back, is because I saw an interview with Lou Reed. And Lou Reed was being interviewed on the MTV. Kitty, please. My cat is noisy. He was being interviewed on... Just give him the attention. The whole world's watching, Kitty. The whole world. And I can smell it. Give me a moment. I use this stuff right here. I got it for a discount. No disrespect to Sean or Julian. There's rumors that John Lennon kind of stunk a little bit because he ate liver. He would send Yoko to the store to get chicken liver. I've seen his grocery list. I've studied John Lennon. But let me say something. I was joking. John Lennon didn't stink. He was the greatest musician of all time. One of them, at least. One of the top 5. Okay. By the way, I released a new song called I Lost Control, which I've done before. I released it on my Facebook. People are obsessed with the Dakota incident. I have a friend named Lorca. She would hang out with Yoko, so she probably knows a little bit about it if she asked. They don't really like talking about it. But the doorman's looking at Adam like, oh my goodness. The doorman was involved. So he surrendered the gun. He was able to put the gun down. And so by the time that the police came there, boom, you know, they just arrested him. And then basically what happened was they took him in, they interviewed him, and this went on for several months. And finally they institutionalized him. So John Hinckley, who shot Ronald Reagan, was institutionalized as well. And John Hinckley's out shopping. He can go to the grocery store and buy peanut butter and a magazine about the assassination of John Lennon or whatever he wants to buy, maybe something on Jodie Foster. But regardless, John Lennon is assassinated and Mark David Chapman is institutionalized. So is there a possibility that he'll be released? Probably not during Sean or Julian's life. Probably not. Because he is pretty dangerous. I mean, after he's done this. But he completed his goal. Like, he killed John Lennon. He murdered him. Hinckley didn't. Hinckley did not kill Ronald Reagan for the sake of Jodie Foster. So Hinckley was not successful in his assassination attempt. Mark David Chapman succeeded in killing one of the greatest rock stars of all time. And Adam the Woo is showing us. Sorry, as you know, I was interrupted. But Mark David Chapman assassinated and was successful in killing John Lennon, taking away a family man, taking away a great musician, one of the greatest members of the Beatles, as well as one of the greatest members of a rock band. I think John Lennon did try to keep the Beatles together. I think he tried to. I think they would have got back together. I think the Beatles would have got back together if John Lennon would have survived. Anyway, the reason I didn't write the play, and this goes back, I lived in a place off of Darnell Street, which is now the Modern Art Museum, and I lived in a wooden apartment there that they had leveled and tore down. Kitty, not this time. Where's Kitty? I'm trying to tell the reason why, but I have to make sure Kitty's okay. Where are you, Kitty? He completely disappeared. Oh, there he is. Look at him right here. Are you going to be quiet? He wants all the attention. The reason why I did not write the play, chapter 27, which they did turn into a movie, but I didn't write the movie. I did not write the play. It was going to be a little play I was working on. It was a pink spiral. I left it in a storage unit in New York City. I wanted to write it, but Lou Reed had got on an interview on MTV, and he was looking right at the TV. Lou Reed's passed away. And Lou Reed said, you know, that would be stupid. That would be like making a movie starring Mark David Chapman the killer of John Lennon and making him like a celebrity. And it makes sense to me now because Lou Reed said that. And I said, okay, I'm not going to write the play. Because what it does is it idolizes murder and makes a person that's pretty evil, makes them good. And it's not good to kill. And John Lennon was against killing. He was against the Vietnam War. And he even posted on billboards that the war is over. The war is over. The war is over. And that's what he posted. And he marched to it in New York City. And he died by his word. The war is over. It's over. So just to clarify, Adam did say that the Double Fantasy was already recorded. I don't know. I heard him say something about watching the wheels go around single, and I thought he said something that Double Fantasy was being recorded, but it was already recorded. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I think Mark David Chapman had a copy of it. I just heard him say it here, so maybe I misheard him. I thought he said that it hadn't been recorded or it was in the process of being recorded. But it was released by Geffen Records in November, and the assassination took place on December 8th of that year of 1980. Anyway, it's also one of the famous assassinations. Just like Abraham Lincoln is a famous assassination. There's many of them. JFK was a big assassination. Robert Kennedy was a big assassination. Pretty famous. But the John Lennon assassination is probably, I would say, the most famous assassination compared to maybe JFK from my time in my study. Anyway, sorry about that, Adam. I thought you said that Double Fantasy was currently being recorded, and I was like, it was recorded and released. So I just wanted to make sure, because that's important to me. This is an important vlog. It'll go down in my saved vlogs. I will go back and look at it many times. I do appreciate you guys getting this footage. This is all valuable to me. So if I do decide to write the play, and I get a little extra time and I'm later on in my life saying, you know what? I'm going to go back and write that play about the assassination of John Lennon by Mark David Chapman, which I'll probably call it Chapter 27, just like the movie. And there'll be copyright issues drawn, and lawyers will be, and Jared Leto would call, and because Jared Leto did the movie. Originally, my play was titled Chapter 27. It's a common play. The reason, okay, last thing. The reason why it's called Chapter 27 is because in the book, Kitty, sorry about that, Kitty. My cat's, this right here, someone's calling from Arlington. The Catcher and the Rye by J.D. Salinger was with Mark David Chapman when he assassinated the one and only John Lennon. There is only 26 chapters. So if you look right here, and I noticed I've done this a few times on selfie and you can't always see. So I'm gonna try to let you guys see. I can't see it because of how my glasses are. What does that say? 24? No, it says 26. He was living out the 27th chapter of this book, Catcher in the Rye. He wanted to make a 27th chapter. Mark David Chapman did. He didn't write the book. It was written by J.D. Salinger. But he wanted to write it in his head and tell a news story. And it had to do with the assassination of one of the greatest rock stars. And Rolling Stones consider him the greatest. And Rick Beato considers him the greatest. But John Lennon is dead, and the war is over. See Adam DeWoo's wonderful vlog, informational vlog, logical vlog. See it, watch it, weep, or just get the information. And get your copy of Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. Great book. Everyone says Nuts have it. I don't care. I have it too. I also have a copy of Taxi Driver too. And I'm not a John Hinckley fan, but I would love to interview him. And Mark David Chapman can be interviewed as well. God bless. Not good night yet. We still have to go to Dallas. I looked it up. It's Charter Arms. It's an undercover .38 special revolver. I believe it has 5 chambers. But he's still going over the final moments of John Lennon visiting the Dakota. I don't know what this section is right here, but the reason I'm mentioning the type of gun that David Chapman used to assassinate John Lennon is because it was a militant action. I believe that, yeah. It was militant. He was let me explain. David Chapman was a security guard. He was armed. He did arm himself, and he did use his sidearm. He did kneel, from what I know. He knelt to get a better aim, and he fired 5 times, all 5 bullets. Some will argue 6, but it was a 5 chamber, and he did successfully kill John Lennon, hitting him in some vital areas of his body. I saw, if we look at it, I saw that Adam showed Mount Sinai. I don't know if that's where he went or not, because I have to go back and refer to the book. But he does show it. Adam shows it. There it is right there. That's Mount Sinai. So this is an emergency vehicle. If that's where he went, then that's where he went. I don't know. I'd have to research it on the book. But he was talking about Sean and Julian before he died. He was talking about his children. He was speaking. He was put in an ambulance, I believe. I think there was also a rumor that he was put into a police car and taken. They did arrest David Chapman on the spot. David Chapman was unarmed because the gun was wrestled away from him. I think I remember now from the book that they wrestled the gun away from David Chapman. And I think he threw it on the ground or something. And I don't know what the doorman or whoever got the gun. I don't know what they did with it. But he was unarmed, and he was taken in successfully, and he was eventually institutionalized after he was talking about the courtroom that was going on in his head. He had a courtroom, almost like you would say when John Bunyan wrote Pilgrim's Progress, that there was a town of vanity. There was a judge and a whole courtroom of people that was inside David Chapman's mind. And this court, this argument to kill John Lennon was going on in David's Chapman's mind for years and years and years. And in my play that I was going to write, I was going to present this courtroom of people that talked about why John Lennon should be assassinated. Inside of David Chapman's head, we were seeing this courtroom unfold inside the mind of David Chapman. But these were the reasons, many reasons, why John Lennon would be assassinated and taken to Mount Sinai to die. And once he was convinced, David Chapman, as a security guard, signed his name out as John Lennon, flew from Hawaii all the way to New York City, went to the Dakota, and put John Lennon into Mount Sinai Hospital, where John Lennon said his final words, probably to maybe Yoko. Yoko was asked to stay out in the hall because they tried to save him. And Lennon died on the operating table near the doctors and nurses, thinking of his children and his family. It's a serious, serious issue, and it is something to be choked up over, because Adam and Tampa J were very choked up when they heard Strawberry Fields playing as they walked and told the story. This is history.